Hello and welcome to the Creative Jungle podcast. I'm your host, Sam.
And I'm Diana.
And we're all about bringing creativity to life and business.
With each episode, we'll be speaking to creators, inventors, entrepreneurs, and how they've lived creative lives and brought creativity to their business. Let's begin.
And today we're speaking to an old friend of mine called Aonghus Shortt with two T's. He's one of the smartest people I know, and he's always bubbling with ideas. He now runs a successful digestive health startup called Foodmarble that has raised millions in funding and helped tens of thousands of people get a better handle on their digestive health through making a device called Aire and a companion app, which was the world's first personal digestive tracker brought to market. Wow.
Absolutely amazing. So 1 in 8 people in the world have digestive health issues. I didn't know that. Did you know that?
I didn't.
No. And, we have found more and more talking about this, that actually more and more people do have it, and this is becoming an issue that more people want to deal with. Digestive health is not often talked about, but the science has come a really long way.
Today on the podcast, we'll chat through how he has creatively changed careers from electricity research to building hardware and software to help people, through to learning how to create and build that hardware, to creatively growing a team and a company with now over 20 staff, I believe, or around 20 people. We want to get into the nitty gritty here. So there are things that are helpful to you so you can creatively go about your life and your business whilst growing as a person and impacting others. So that's the intro.
Yeah, welcome, Aonghus.
Welcome, Aonghus.
So, the journey, Aonghus, we want to know how you moved from electricity into diving into digital health, and how you invented your device. Was that something you always wanted to do?
Well, I mean, when I was younger, I did start some businesses and with varying levels of success. I mean, I had a web design company and a web hosting company, which weren't really that successful, but I had some ridiculous businesses like making my own scratch cards and like making ice pops and selling them.
Christmas logs. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh yeah, it's really like shockingly terrible ideas, but kind of always been interested in setting up stuff and trying to do things myself and with other people. Well, yeah, I was in energy research, as you said. It's a strange transition, but it's really somebody close to me, my girlfriend, fiance, Grace.
Fiance, yes, congratulations.
Thank you. So she has digestive problems, and at the time she had just been diagnosed with a condition called IBS, which a lot of people will be aware of. I think that's actually that's where the 1 in 8 figure comes from. That's like 1 in 8 people have IBS, which is like a really shockingly large amount of people. It's not something that's talked about a lot, but anyway, she'd been diagnosed with IBS. She had multiple operations, different scopes and all these really invasive procedures people get when they have digestive problems. And she'd been on different medications. She'd been on these these medications that can have a really significant impact on your body. Very often not helping with the actual symptoms or with your condition, but the side effects can be very significant. So she was she's missing days of work. She's really struggling with her condition, and I suppose for me, she probably would have preferred if I just, empathized and like listened and be a good boyfriend like that. But I suppose I've come in from the engineering background, and engineers have a problem, and that they see when they see a problem, they just want to
you think to solve it.
Yeah, I think they could solve everything. So I started prototyping, made some devices, and she was using them, and she's finding it useful. And I could see, like, in doing the research, like in developing this device, I could see there's a huge amount of people affected by this. So so eventually it just kind of grew into a business. And this was an idea. I think it's an idea. It's sort of taboo, like digestive health is a taboo. Like people don't talk about things like, if somebody has diarrhea or something. It's sort of like,
gosh, yeah.
People are not going to talk about that.
No.
And you just presume it's food poisoning. I think most people, food poisoning. Think it's an underlying issue that somebody has, and they might have it very regularly.
Well, it's interesting you gave that example because Grace felt she just had food poisoning, initially. Because,
really? Like just frequent food poisoning, yeah.
Yeah, it's the same symptoms, really, or very similar symptoms. And it's only by, going to the doctor and going to several doctors that, she got this different diagnosis. And it's sort of unfortunate because food poisoning, at least usually it comes to a conclusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, often in cases like this, it's something that affects people for life.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, it seems you'd kind of almost committed, at least in your head, look, I need to spend lots of time figuring this out. It might be useful to go through, I guess, what were the first couple of steps you took in terms of building the device and looking at it, and then also Fodmap and how it all relates would be interesting.
Yeah, so I was coming from outside digestive health, so I had a lot of research to do. You mentioned the Low Fodmap Diet and the whole concept of FODMAPs. That's pretty central to it because they're basically a collection of hard to digest food components. Just in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, it's became clear through a lot of scientific research that these particular groups of food are often at the heart of what is the difficulty for people. Includes things like lactose, which is in dairy, fructose, which is in fruit, and a lot of processed food as well. Actually, all of these things are often in processed food, so it's very, it makes it very hard. So, and there's a bunch of these different things, like for example inulin, it's in wheat, so it makes its way into bread, pasta, and again lots of processed foods. But then it's also in onion and garlic. Like it's a big reason why onion and garlic can be difficult for people.
When I first found that out, I thought it was bad because I cook with onion all the time.
Yeah.
So I can imagine if that is a problem food, then
Yeah, and it is very difficult because these are things kind of at the core of kind of a lot of culinary traditions around the world. Like garlic, pretty core ingredients. Luckily there's techniques. I mean, not to stray off topic, but in the case of onion and garlic, if you actually heat them up in oil, the FODMAPs won't actually go into the oil because they're only water soluble. So they'll only go into water or water-based things. So you can get the flavor into the oil.
Yeah, very good.
That's a good tip. That's a good tip.
Yeah. Number one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose coming back to your question, Sam, it's really there's a lot of research to do, and needed to build a team. Like that's the number one. Everyone knows, I think, once you've been in startups for some time, the foundational team is just probably the most important thing. So it's really about building a team, and that's an ongoing thing. As I said, there's 20 of us now, and it's I think it's where often ideas fail or succeed is just that kind of being able to build out those team, and you guys know about too.
So building a good team, as you mentioned early on in the chat, is really important to success. I guess, how have you approached that in terms of getting people in, and how have you fostered teamwork? Because I imagine collaboration is crucial to anything succeeding. So what have you done to do that?
Yeah, so I think one of the ways that we differ from other startups that I've noticed is that we probably hire in a different way to a lot of people. So I've heard a lot of other founders speaking about how they do hiring, and something that comes up a lot is trusting your gut, and sort of basing a lot of your decisions on sort of your sense of a person. And I see where people are coming from with that, but a really tricky issue with doing that is when it comes to it, it has a tendency to be very open to biases. And I've seen it with people. The, a lot of the people they hire are just people that are a lot like them, and you know, I think sometimes the hiring process can become a situation where people are, they, they hire people who they like and who they have a good conversation with. Um, but like if you're really meeting your responsibility as somebody building a team, you need to find the people who are just going to make the company better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
What the output is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think being really objective and being really looking trying to eliminate as much bias in your thinking, not to be too driven by people talk the cultures of the critical in a company, but culture fit I think is something that's used as an excuse for picking people that you like too often,
Yeah.
when you need to pick who you think is going to be the best person for the job. And it's been interesting in following those sort of principles. We've developed a very diverse team, and and it helps because it's sort of you'll have people who come in, for example, like maybe they're coming from a different culture, maybe their language skills aren't exactly what you need, but in a lot of cases it's like that doesn't matter. I mean, it's kind of, it really depends on what the needs of the role are, and if building that diversity, it just makes the team much stronger. So I think it's really it is hard, but one thing we do is, like, we'll always have every morning everyone's going to meet the people on their team. So I think that helps. Something as well is just finding random ways of bringing a little bit of happiness to people through kind of, like, say, like maybe you just send them a parcel with some lunch or so, or or something nice, or just like remembering, like if somebody does something and you notice it, and you notice that it's really good, like not forgetting to tell them, like, whether that mean maybe if you get on the phone to them, or just over Slack or something, but letting them know that they did a good job, because it's easy to forget to do that.
I think what you said, there's so, like, two things, like, just to echo what you said about the culture fit. I've definitely I agree with you, actually. I think that's maybe a bit becoming more outdated. I've heard a new term, a culture add, which I think is so important. And as you said, it's emphasized that it's that diversity. We don't need to be the same, because you're adding something new and bringing a new dimension to this team. And then the second thing about appreciating people, I mean, that I think, Sam, and I just feel so strongly about that, because often it doesn't cost anything, or it costs very little to show gratitude, or to buy lunch, or take everyone out for drinks. But it's that people really like that feeling of being appreciated and feeling part of something is just so much more powerful. With this, in terms of, like, the first step, did you actually focus more on building the team before you figured out the device? Especially, I guess, with the complexity of the device, was that
with a device thing, especially something that relates to health, which adds another layer of complexity. Your body's is incredibly complex. It had the prototyping had to get to a stage where it was working. So even though it, like, like at these early stages, it was basically a circuit board that I put into like a box made of cardboard. That was the level. So it didn't look very fancy, but it was working at that time. And that's about the time where trying to get some people involved, and trying to speak to people who know about this, more about, like, how to set up a business and how to do it successfully.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is, you focused on getting a base product, and then you build a team that can help you actually make this into a business, as opposed to just you can keep your expertise on the product, and then a team around you to take it to the next level.
Part of it's about the skills and expertise, and part of it's just that it's just a horribly difficult thing to do to set up a company and for it to succeed.
So
you just need the support, you need somebody to speak to.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lonely road otherwise.
Yeah.
And how I'm interested to hear, how did you approach like building hardware? The reason I ask this is there's so many different things going on. You're trying to build a team, you're trying to build hardware, there's accompanying software to go with it, you're trying to get funding. Like, how did you tackle that? Like, was it just on a week-to-week basis almost, you were like, here's the main things I need to do, and kind of not thinking too far ahead because there's an awful lot to do? Or like, how did you think about that and approach that?
I think you're right, Sam. I mean, to kind of make something really successful, you need to like really dig into the user experience and all that whole customer experience and all that sort of stuff. But to start with, you kind of need to take small steps. You're not, but it's one or two people. You can't do everything. And so like I was looking at, coming from the engineering background and having done a lot of software development already and that sort of stuff, I didn't need to learn all of those things, and I didn't need to get external help to be able to build a software and hardware prototypes. Well, that's not fully true, but there's certainly, you need to, get help. Like I remember early on, like in my my old university, I went in, and some of the technical people were able to help by making some prototype circuit boards for me, and just eternally grateful for people like that who were able to provide that help. But yeah, it's really like it. If somebody was to say to me, "Oh, I want to set up like a health tech device that has a software and a data platform, and it has to it has to pass regulatory scrutiny and all these various things." Like,
yeah.
I'd say that's a stupid idea. That's a really bad, like, do something simpler, do something easier, because it's just too hard. And that thought does go through my head on a probably a weekly basis as to why did you do this? But
what is this? Yeah. I can imagine.
But it's definitely a process.
What were the biggest struggles, I guess, particularly with the device at the start? Like, was it particularly big and you had to make it really small, or was there sensors that you needed to?
Yeah, like
how did you actually get around designing it?
Yeah, I think the engineering challenges, like one very clear engineering challenge was that when I started doing this, the sensors were at a quality where, or at a level of development where you could kind of do this, but didn't work that well. It worked fairly well, but not like at the level of something that could go out into mass production. But luckily for me, sensors started coming to market, starting to become available where you could do this at a much higher quality standard. So I was kind of lucky. I mean, like that sort of technology that people all over the world were developing over multiple decades coming to fruition enables all this stuff.
That is timing.
Yeah.
That is timing for you.
If you had that idea 10 years ago, it would have been 10 times harder by the sounds of it to build it. So like, it's amazing now. It's almost a good reason to hold on to an idea. Sometimes it's just not the right time, and you think of it, but in technology might develop, and then it becomes the right time in the future.
That's I mean, when you think about how just that, it's almost like a perfect match, isn't it? You working on it, and then this being the launch pad. Did you also go to a hardware accelerator? I think I remember saying something about that.
That's right. So, at a relatively early stage, and we applied for this program called HAX, HAX. It's a hardware accelerator based out in China, and it's ran by this global VC called SWSV, and they're a really selective. They like to say more selective than Stanford, I think they say.
Really?
I think it's about 5% acceptance rate. I was actually surprised they let so many people into Stanford, to be honest. But it was a great opportunity because.
That's amazing. What did you have to do to get in?
And sorry, in addition to that, what stage were you at? Like, Did you have a pretty good prototype? Did you have a couple of people that were on the team? How far along were you before the accelerator happened?
Yeah, how to work in prototype, which was a requirement to getting into the accelerator. Um, the team was not, fully complete.
Yeah.
We as the application, as we got through the first stage of the application process, we had to get more people, and that was not ideal. Uh, but yeah, like an incredible opportunity because we're based in Ireland, and Ireland, or really anywhere outside of China, is, truth be told, not an ideal place to develop a physical electronic device. Like China's perfect. Like, things are faster. Like, everyone know, I think everyone expects that things will be cheaper to do in China in terms of prototyping.
Yeah.
They're not just cheaper; they're also a lot faster, and actually the quality is a lot higher. And I think people struggle to accept that. I know I've met a lot of designers in different countries, and they don't see that the quality in Europe or in the US is not at the same standard, and it's a lot slower and it's a lot more expensive. It doesn't really seem like a real place. So this is in Shenzhen, in kind of South China. It's over near Hong Kong, and
Yeah.
lots of cities actually built into one over there. But you could walk down the road and there'll be like a building that's 21 stories, and each story will have a different type of electronic component on it. Like, if you want LEDs, there's a whole floor with every type of LED you could possibly want.
It's nuts.
Yeah, and like, if you want a 3D printed component made, it will be made on really sophisticated equipment, and it'll be made really, really well. But the funny thing is, it might be delivered by a guy on a bike. So it's
State of the art technology on a parcel, just
yeah. So it's a really interesting sort of workshop mentality, but it's a really incredible place to get stuff done, and we advanced so quickly. That was about 6 months, and we probably got more done in 6 months than you do in 2 years elsewhere. So it's really, really impressive.
At what point did you go, okay, now we have to launch this? Because I think a lot of creators, it's such a fine balance to, okay, this thing is going to be work in progress for a while, because I think most things are, especially when dealing with something as complicated as your device. But at some point you're also like, okay, I need to start testing it and see, do people want it? How do they use it? How much will they pay for it?
Yeah, because I imagine as well you have to put in a pretty hefty, large order to start, but it's not going to be 100%. It's going to be like 90%, 95 maybe.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of just take a leap and hope that you get lots of feedback.
Yeah. When did that point come for you?
Yeah. So for us, we did pre-orders of our device, actually through our website. We were going to do a Kickstarter campaign, but we decided to go on our website. This is what we're doing. Do you like it? If you do, this is how long it's going to take to bring to market. And if you'd like to get one, you can do pre-order, and we'll give you a special price. And an advantage of doing stuff on your website as well is that you get a little more control over things, which can be good, because oftentimes you need to change the way you're presenting it, because sometimes it just doesn't, like, the way you're describing it doesn't connect with people, or so because Kickstarter, it's great platform, and I think we'll probably, we hope to do a Kickstarter campaign for future iterations, because it is a great platform. But it's very much, if it doesn't work in the first couple of days, you're dead.
Yeah, you have to peak early.
Yeah, and so that's fine for Kickstarter. A lot of things will fail, but for the startup themselves, or the project, whatever it is, that's fatal. So if you're working on it for quite some time, and you really think you're onto something, maybe that's not the way to go for some people.
How did you market your website for the pre-orders? How did you get people discovering that this new device is going to come to existence imminently?
Well, we didn't really know what we were doing, so we just trying to contact, journalists and that sort of thing, and varied levels of success with that. We did some social media marketing. Um, some of it were like, we were surprised that, like, through stuff like Facebook. We were able to access a lot of people who were very interested in what we're doing. And that was a validation, at least, of, okay, there's some interest here. We certainly had some success with a combination of social media marketing, social media content marketing, and PR.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you've highlighted there, like it is difficult, but what you said, for your device is quite specific, and the beauty with social media is you can reach those very niche people that you don't necessarily, you might not know how to find them, and then the PR is good for that broader,
Yes,
the broader exposure.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just thinking, just to bring it back to the product again, how, two things. One is, how did you know the first time, particularly once the Kickstarter was done, or the pre-order, were completed, that the device was ready to put in the big order? Like, how did you feel that it was the right time and you brought it far long enough to do that? And secondly, it might be worth explaining a little bit about what exactly the Aire device does, because I know you're talking.
Okay.
Device. I'm just conscious we're talking about the device.
Yeah, the device, the mystery device.
But people mightn't know, if you're listening, what exactly the device does.
Yeah, sure. Well, so in terms of what the device does, it's a little digestive tracker device. So it's a breath analysis device, first of all. So it's a little device, and it's just, you use it with your smartphone, and it's measuring hydrogen levels in your breath, and that's interesting because hydrogen is produced by your gut bacteria. If the food you eat isn't digested fully, it's really how how your gut bacteria feed themselves, because they eat the food that's not absorbed fully, and in a fermentation process, and that gives off the hydrogen, and so you're seeing lots of hydrogen being produced. That's an indication that not all the food you're eating is being fully digested. And the problem is that the levels of hydrogen and other gases produced, they start to build up, and that's what leads to a lot of symptoms like bloating and abdominal pain. And it's a pretty complex process, but being able to measure that gas on your breath, that's a really powerful way of being able to look at what you're eating and seeing what the effects are.
Amazing. Okay, fine. So after you eat something, I guess maybe an hour or so later, you can blow into it and then see the level of hydrogen versus a normal level, and see if that food is triggering.
Yeah, so you kind of track the food, log the food, on the app, and then use the device to track the hydrogen, and it kind of marries the two.
Exactly, yeah. And you can also record things like symptom levels. You can record what your sleep was like, what your stress levels were like, because of course stress is something that affects your digestion, and there's different things you can do, like keep different notes and things like that. It's really about looking back on what you've done, what you've eaten, and how you've responded to that. And then the app will also give you feedback. So if you get a high score, for example, the app will show you, what you ate and what inside that food most likely caused a problem for you.
That's so like a kind of smart diary / analysis all in one.
And I think I remember you saying early on with this that what people would have to do to kind of test for how they reacted to these certain foods or fructose or lactose was literally go to a hospital, and they might need to go 5-6 separate days to kind of test for each of the items on the FODMAP. Whereas now you can, through the device, you can do it at home.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the unfortunate truth is, a lot of people will go to their doctor, and but most doctors don't have much training as regards digestion and nutrition and things like that, and their doctors would often have very little they could say to them. I mean, that's what really happens. I mean, that's what in a lot of cases. And if you're lucky, you might get referred to a dietitian or to a gastroenterologist, and And you often with the dietitian, you might be doing food and symptom logging, like with pen and paper, or maybe with an app of some sort. Um, and and that's kind of part of what we're trying to reproduce, where you have that, you're looking back and you can see what's happening, and we're trying to do that in more detail, where when you're recording what you eat, like we have a database of the food of lots of foods and what's in the foods, so we can kind of give you much more detail on what's in these foods and how those foods could affect you. But then, like if you go to gastroenterologists, they're the sort of guys that might have the technology, that might have some of these diagnostic tests where you can go to the hospital and, like you say, Sam, do some of this testing. Um, but most people wouldn't have access to that, and it's very hard in most countries to get referred to a gastroenterologist.
Yeah.
So,
Back again to the product. How do you know when to ship?
Yeah.
When is it ready? What's the test, or what's the
yeah.
point?
So like bringing a physical, hardware device to market is a nightmare.
in one sentence.
More gray hairs.
Oh my goodness! Don't tell me. So there's a number of aspects. One, like to ensure it's like in terms of accuracy, that you're getting an accuracy over the long term, and that every unit that's leaving the factory is at a quality standard where you can stand over that. So there's kind of that aspect of how well is this working as a measurement device, and once that's at a certain standard, then you're comfortable.
And that standard, like something that's set out in health, in health systems on this matter, or is it a standard that you created yourself and said, I'd only be happy if it's this level of accuracy?
Well, so there's standard ways in which breath analysis devices are are tested and calibrated, and so you've got these gas standards, and there's a whole process of doing that. And for this, like, as a lot of people will discover, when you go into a particular type of industry, there's a lot you won't know about how to actually do these things at scale, especially. So we're very lucky to find a manufacturer who had developed a lot of breath analysis devices before, or who had manufactured at least a lot of breath analysis devices. So we were able to understand how is this done at scale in an effective way. So that was a godsend. But a lot of the things that hold up, manufacturing or production of any product is mundane things like the casing, like making the casing very difficult in a lot of products, especially for such a small product. The packaging, like packaging's complicated, a lot more complicated than I think most people would expect.
Really?
Yeah.
It always seems like the fun part. Beautiful packaging. Yeah.
Like a lot of things, to get one device looking exactly like a production device, or one piece of packaging exactly as it should be, that's there's a certain level of difficulty in getting there. But actually to be able to mass produce both of those things in some cases can be very difficult, and to ensure consistency. So there's some of the things that come with the territory. So to answer your question, Sam, really it was about ensuring that the device and everything about the device, everything about the packaging was at a standard. But also, we've got software and we've got data analysis in there, so ensuring that's at a certain standard. And yeah, at a certain point you just have to release, because people have pre-ordered and you can't leave people waiting forever. And I think that is hard, because you just have to balance those needs, and then it's when it comes to the software aspect, you can continuously update that. With the hardware, if you make one mistake and you make 10,000 devices, you've got 10,000 mistakes.
In terms of prototypes for the device and the packaging, with the manufacturers that made them in bulk, how many different prototypes did they make? Like, did you get 45 different types of the casing and 20 types of boxes, or was it just a couple of iterations?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of parts to it. I mean, not to go into too much detail, but maybe we would have had 10 or 15 prototypes of the mouthpiece, for example, which is like it's a small piece of plastic, but you wouldn't believe how difficult that is to make.
Yeah.
Like a lot of manufacturers that we went through 3 manufacturers. The first 2 were very sophisticated manufacturers who, one of them makes robotic vacuum cleaners, for example, and a lot of sophisticated things, but they weren't able to produce our device because it's making small things is hard.
Yeah.
And just getting things at a standard where like they work as people expect, because people's expectations when it comes to a physical device are very high. Since like people like Apple changed the game, where people wouldn't accept people no longer accept things that aren't exactly the right color, aren't exactly the right, everything doesn't snap in perfectly. And even packaging, like Apple brought on packaging a long way too. Things just used to come in very basic boxes, and now like packaging, it's almost like the era of the unboxing video.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny when you were saying about small devices and that kind of beautiful aesthetic that also fits in with how you use the product. I literally was thinking like Apple, like they've changed the game. And you're so right, like if it's a device that I'm going to use all the time, you want it to be light, you want it to be small, it has to look a certain, or you have just these internal expectations of it just looking a certain way. Gosh, it sounds like a lot to balance out in your brain.
A little note: Anu has brought you this podcast. MYO Make Your Own produces branded creative content and runs creative classes for friends, families, and companies. Find out more at MYO London on Instagram. Creative Jungle Company is the home of this podcast, and as well as the podcast that we do creative kits for your company and friends and all things creative thinking. Basically, we're all about bringing creativity to life and business. Find out more at Creative Jungle Co. on Instagram. Back to the podcast.
So going a little bit to logistics, just bearing in mind that, your product is manufactured in China. How, for the first batch, how did that work? As in, you would have had orders, I imagine, all over the world. How did that actually work in terms of getting it tested? Was it done at the manufacturing facility, or did you kind of do your own tests over in Ireland and then ship it out from there? Or how did that work initially, and how has that evolved since? Like, what happens now with the devices that are shipped out?
Yeah, well, I mean, at the earliest stages when you're shipping out the first 100 devices or so, you're doing things that you could not possibly do later. So there's just a lot more checks, both in the manufacturing facility, and then also, like, I think with a lot of the early devices, we would have got them shipped to us first and done further testing to confirm the testing that was done by the manufacturer. And I think that the first batch of devices were a lot better than we expected, and there was very few problems. But we just wanted to be careful. Like in terms of logistics, like it's incredible. There's just this whole hidden industry that most people aren't aware of in terms of shipping freight around the world. Like for a product like this, where we had to fulfill expectations of our customers who wanted devices as soon as possible. Everything had to be shipped by plane, and the costs are not like logistics now. The costs are not excessive anymore. So and people like Amazon have really kind of pushed things further in a lot of respects as well. But I mean, like back then, we were doing logistics at a one center, but now we've got 3 logistics centers around the world to cover
the globe,
different regions.
The globe, around the world.
Logistics is always it's one of those sort of difficult sort of things, because there's so many little things that could go wrong, and you just sort of have to try and provide the best service you can, but in a very uncertain sort of, because you're not personally delivering anything.
No, exactly.
So kind of being able to get devices out to some places is very difficult. Like, for example, we've got a lot of customers in Australia, and getting devices out there can be very difficult to do at a cost that's not like incredibly expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fundamentally, it costs a huge amount of money to get something out to a rural part of Australia, and the company will have to just absorb that cost. But
Yeah.
and then on the other side of things, shipping something to an urban center in the United States, for example, costs very little. So it's you kind of
And
have to.
there are a lot of, you're going to get a big pool of customers. So over the whole, maybe it balances itself out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, like, expectations around shipping is that shipping doesn't cost, right? So,
Yeah.
so people won't, they don't want to pay for shipping, even though, like, say shipping our device, it will cost anything between, as low as like say $4 or something,
Yeah.
up 60 or plus dollars. I don't think people realize that like it can be a really tremendous cost. So, yeah, you just
We've been spoiled by Amazon Prime, haven't we?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 With all of this, I think one bit that would be good to cover, like creating something so complex, getting thousands of products to market, shipping to a point, I didn't even realize it could cost like $60. Is in money. Like all of these need money. Do you want to quickly just tell us about how you got investment to do this? Your journey with getting investment and managing that, because I think managing funds is always a fun part of running any sort of business.
Yeah, so if, like, investment, raising money is, my role in the company is a big part of my role, and it is very challenging trying to when you're doing something quite new. It's quite difficult to raise money because investors, they look to see what's worked in the past, as you'd expect. So they look to see what sort of businesses have been very successful, and they'll look to see, okay, does this company do something that I've seen work previously? And if you haven't, then it's a harder sell. So that's always been difficult for us. And coming from Ireland as well. Like in Ireland, there's a lot of medical device companies. There's a lot of successful pharma startups and different things like that. So raising money is one of those sort of companies is quite easy. But when you're a little bit more towards the consumer side of things, there isn't that history in Ireland of building those businesses. So it is quite difficult. So there's huge disparities in terms of like raising money in